Hello everybody, I am Conquering History Games and welcome to a new interesting historical characters guide here in Crusader Kings 2. Finally, we have a Monarch's Journey character who, you're probably hearing a jingle in the back, just ignore that. We have a Monarch's Journey character who begins in one of the 1300s era start, which I've been waiting for them to do. For those of you who don't know, when a lot of these Monarch's Journeys come out, and I'm probably going to retroactively go back and do the ones that I've missed, I like to discuss some of the interesting characters to play in that time that's given. So, for example, King Basarab of Wallachia. Is that, you know what? I'm so sorry. That's not how it is pronounced. I'll look that up in a second, or maybe I should just right now. Sorry, it's been a while. Okay, you're probably gonna hear it on the desktop. Wallachia, that's it. That's how it's pronounced. Sorry. It's because I usually read about these things, so when I'm just looking at letters, I don't always know how to properly pronounce it in the native tongue. So yeah, the King Basarab of Wallachia, he's starting us in the 1st of January 1310 start. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through, I think I've got 22 characters in particular. Actually, a little bit more. There's a couple I don't go into a lot of detail on. But characters that are also interesting to play here in this 1310 start. So we'll go ahead and get started as rapidly as possible, and I hope that you all enjoy. We've got quite an interesting array here. I've been very excited about this. Okay, so first off, King Basarab of Wallachia. I'm actually not going to go into too much detail about him because I'm going to discuss him at the start of my run of the Monarch's Journey, because I am going to do that. Keep an eye out for that in the next couple of days to be getting uploaded. But the only thing that you really need to know is that he is the first independent ruler of Wallachia, and he is very involved in Balkan affairs and like a lot of the wars that were going on here, and he's the one who throws off the authority of Pannonia, who is ruled by a very interesting family and nationality, who's kind of really getting around Europe at this time, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, number 2, we've got King Todor of Bulgaria, also known as Theodore Svetsvalar. So he is the ruler of Bulgaria after a period of repeated Mongol influence. As you can see, all the Mongols out here, they've taken quite a bit of land. So fun fact, because you have these Mongolian horsemen coming in, but fun fact, the Terter family, you could probably guess from the name, is actually Kumani in origin. So when King Theodore was younger, he was actually a hostage of the Mongols, and during his reign he did manage to capture some areas of South Bessarabia, just various other lands from the Golden Horde. He also seized Thracian land from the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire losing land during this period is going to be a recurring theme, but he was very successful at it. He defeated emperors. He even got involved in some of the Byzantine civil wars, including the one that would abdicate Andronikos II here, who's the current emperor of Byzantium. All right, number 3, we've got. I'll probably stop numbering them. And I'll try to within the next week put this timestamp. So I'm not going to be able to put this up today because I want to get it up as quickly as possible. But I'll put timestamps in the future. Okay, so we have here King Uros IV Milutin of Serbia of House Nemanjic. He also sometimes got his name spelled as Stefan Milutin. So he was the king of Serbia for almost 30 years at this point in 1310. He's considered one of Serbia's greatest kings. He took Byzantine lands from them and also resisted the spread of Byzantine Catholicism into the area, which might sound very strange because when we think about the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, we think of the Greek Orthodox Church, but a previous emperor, if we go into the history here, this one, Michael VIII, at one point in his life was Catholic and was attempted to spread that Catholicism throughout the region. Hard to believe that a guy like him died a natural death. Anyway, he also warred against the Bulgarians and the Mongols. All right, so number 4, let's talk about this big salmon-colored elephant in the Balkans, and that would be Pannonia, which, very interesting character here, Charles the First of Hungary, who is a member of, well, I guess I should explain this. You're probably noticing, wait, he's French? This is not an error. He became the king of Hungary due to a claim through his mother, who was a Habsburg, funnily enough. And his father was Charles d'Anjou, meaning that his grandfather was King Charles II of Naples. But he had been disinherited from being able to claim Naples for reasons that don't really matter here. So what does matter is that he was made the king of Hungary. But he spent the early part of his reign warring against the local Hungarian nobles, attempting to secure his crown, because obviously a lot of Hungarian nobles were going to have a problem with this Frenchman coming in and saying that he's their king. Also, he does have the bloodline of Philippe Capet, Philip the Great, which gives him bonus damage against religious enemies, as well as extra piety and personal combat skill. So he can kind of spread that into Eastern Europe. And he also has, he is the suzerain of both Bosnia and Croatia. Also, he used to control Wallachia, but they were thrown off, which is why this other guy is considered to be so great. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier, Basarab is an ancestor of Vlad the Impaler, so that's fun, and that's why one of the things is one of the points in the achievements that you can get is attached to impaling people. All right. So anyway, Charles of Pannonia basically becomes this peace broker / diplomat / conqueror of a lot of Eastern Europe here, and because of this, during after his lifetime, some of his offspring were able to become kings of not just Hungary or Pannonia in this case, but also Poland, for example, as well as becoming smaller lords of many smaller areas. He did have some failures, so for example, he was not able to bring Wallachia back into the fold, but I think a good challenge, if you're going to be starting from this timestamp of 1310, would be to pick King Charles here. He's only 21 years old as well, he's not married, the whole world is your oyster basically, and see if you can carve some sort of empire, maybe a custom empire, because there's not really anything here. Like I guess you could form Carpathia and then go from there, but creates a French Eastern European empire that stretches from the Baltic to the Black Sea. I think that would be a really fun challenge to do, and I highly recommend it. All right, number 5, we have here Robert I of Scotland, a.k.a. Robert the Bruce, who I'm sure you all know. If you've heard of William Wallace, I'm definitely sure you've heard of him, and you've also heard of Robert the Bruce. Now, William Wallace is unfortunately dead by the time we get to 1310, so you can't get his bloodline, which is unfortunate. But Robert's pretty interesting in his own right. He's the winner of the First Scottish War of Independence. So Robert came to power in Scotland. It was kind of a long, complicated process, which we don't have to be getting into right now. But the important thing is that he claimed ownership of the king, that he was the rightful king of Scotland, because he could trace himself back to King David I of Scotland, who was, of course, the head of the Davidian reforms. And I would also like to remind you all that King David of Scotland's mother was Margaret of Wessex. He has Wessex blood in his veins. So you know what that tells me? That tells me that King Robert has a claim on England that has used to belong to the Wessex family, and I think it's time to get somebody with a couple drops of it in their veins back in charge. But also, through his mother, Countess Majorki of Carrick here, she's from Galloway, but without getting too much into it, she also, through her, Robert the Bruce has a claim on Leinster. Now, of course, these claims on England and Leinster are not literally given to your character. I'm just talking about what's right, what's just for Robert the Bruce. So, if you have a claim on Leinster, then you really have a claim on all of Ireland, as far as I'm concerned, right? So, what I would suggest to do, if you're going to play as him, is form that historic alliance with France, which might be difficult actually to do right at the start of the game for reasons I'll talk about later. But try to form that historical alliance between the Scots and the French that existed. Press those non-existent claims, but they do exist. They exist in the hearts and minds of the people. On England, on Ireland, form Britannica, and rule the waves. So, all right, moving on. Speaking, you got to end those Edwardians. And speaking of the Edwardians, we currently have in charge here of England King Edward II of England. More Braveheart characters. Of course, the infamous Spaz that was married to Queen Isabella of France, Queen Isabel of England, who also has the blood of Philip the Great, but it's not a matrilineal marriage. But she does come with a weak claim on the Kingdom of Navarre, but that's probably going to be difficult to press for reasons we're going to talk about later. But let's talk about Edward II, the man, for a minute. Now, historically, he's the one who lost Scotland. It was actually Edward III that formally created did the treaty with Robert that made Scotland officially independent, but in reality, Robert's been in charge following the Battle of Bannockburn. So Edward II was a very, very weak king. Definitely has a claim to being one of the weakest kings in English history, and he essentially spends most of his reign fighting his own vassals. Very weak militarily as well as domestically. There is at least one noted occasion where Isabel is actually the one who ended up leading an army during a battle rather than him. He also was possibly homosexual, which they did get into in Braveheart. Not that Braveheart is like any sort of a documentary of the period, but it is very possible that he was homosexual. Now his wife, Isabel, did end up cucking him with Roger Mortimer, so and she actually ends up helping Roger Mortimer invade England later. So Roger Mortimer, to find him, you actually want to go over here to Duke Gilbert III of Gwent, and you go into his court, and you will find him here. He is a commander with a strong claim on the county of Shrewsbury. So, without turning this into a history of Edward II's entire reign, Roger Mortimer was outside of England and ended up raising an army to invade England, and was assisted by Edward II's own wife Isabel and their son, maybe Edward's son, maybe not, who would go on to be Edward III. So Edward II's own wife and son left him to aid his enemies, and that's not even getting into things with the dispenders and things like that. You know what? On second thought, here's what you need to do. Forget Edward II. You need to come over here to Roger Mortimer, play as France or something, invite him over, even though he's English, and make him the King of England somehow. That'll be fun. That's much better. Don't play Edward II. He's a little bitch. Excuse my language. Okay, let's move on. So let's actually talk about... so we have Philippe IV of France here, of the Capetian dynasty. Now, he is the King of France, but he also right now holds the crown, the Kingdom of Navarre, which he has a claim on primarily through his wife, who is Queen Jeanne of Navarre, who also has... Actually, is that an error? That's interesting. So they're both considered to be the rulers of the Kingdom of Navarre right now. That's really interesting. It's because she died. That's how he inherited it. Excuse me. I knew that. Also has the blood of Philip the Great. Philip the Great's progeny are all over Europe right now, if you haven't been able to tell already. Okay, so the main thing with Philip is his reign would lead effectively to the end of the Capetian dynasty. There was an enormous scandal in the last year of his life, which would indirectly lead to the 100 Years' War. Now, Philip here, he's got 3 sons, then of course his daughter Isabel, who he's married to the King of England. The dynasty should, in theory, be basically secured for all time. Like, his son's the Count of Navarre, is already married, and things like that. Well, in the last year of King Philip IV's reign, Isabel claimed that all of her sisters-in-law, meaning Philip's 3 sons, all their wives had been committing adultery and cheating on them. So when Philip IV dies, this created what for lack of a better term, I could only call a slow burn succession crisis, because some of them had had children, but because of the adultery claims, which from what I've researched all appeared to be true, there was how would I say, it was in dispute whether these three French princes, their children, were in fact their own children. And so this also led to harsher interpretations of Salic law and the powers of women in French society and in terms of female inheritance. So Philip IV here would eventually die, and then his son Louis would become king, followed by Louis's brother Philippe, followed by Louis's brother Prince Charles, because none of them had male heirs, or at least heirs that weren't in dispute, and then the ones that were female, nobody wanted to have women inherit. So eventually Prince Charles of France is going to die, and then this is going to lead to the 100 Years' War, when the kings of England begin to press claims on France using female succession, because you have Queen Isabel of England here. She was a French woman, and funnily enough, she's the one who accuses her sister-in-laws of the adultery, which is what starts this whole mess. Quite a woman, Isabel. So the kings of England in the future are going to claim that they are also kings of France now that there's been this succession crisis, and one of the primary claims is through Queen Isabel, who was the daughter of King Philippe of the Fourth of France. Now, in case you're curious, the one who did ended up becoming king of France after his son Charles died was Duke Philippe II of Anjou. So this is when the Valois branch of the Capetians ends up being in charge. So the Capetians are just everywhere. They're ruling France. They've got the Valois branch family, and they have, of course, the Anjou branch family as well. So it's a very French century, the 1300s, and it's really interesting to me. So, of course, your primary goal here is to stop that from happening. You don't want a succession crisis. Make sure you marry good people. Now, as far as things that Philip did before, that last horrible year of his life, he expelled the Jews from France. He also destroyed the Knights Templar. And also, when the papacy had to flee to Avignon, he was the one who... Oh, yeah, actually, they've already shown it here. I think, yeah, right here. As you can see, we've already got the Pope hanging out here in Avignon, because they made that move in, I believe, 1309. So he's, in theory, quite close with the popes. Of course, the popes are being Occitanian and French, so that probably helps. So, as you can see, Rome is not even the current capital of not of the papacy, for reasons that I'm going to talk about in detail later. We're only like 7 characters in. Very exciting stuff. Let's move on. All right, number 8, Ferdinando III of Castile, member of the Diavira family. You guys know that I like to talk about medieval Italy all day long, so I'm probably always going to bring their rulers up during these things. But what you need to know mainly about Ferdinand is he has the blood of Alfonso, so that's going to help him with his prestige and Castilian opinions. So, of course, he's claiming to be the emperor of all Spain, but the main things that you need to know about him is that in Fernando III's reign, he took Gibraltar back from the Muslims, and more importantly, he signed the Treaty of Torres, which is where they agreed on borders with Aragon. The main thing they had been disputing was over Murcia here in the east, kind of along the coast. But they define these borders between the two kingdoms, which are effectively going to stay that way until you get the Catholic monarchs in Ferdinand and Isabella. All right, moving on. We have here King Denis of Portugal. Also has bloodline, the blood of Afonso the Conqueror, whose full name is Afonso de Borgogne. So I never pronounced that name right. I probably did it wrong again. But even though by this point we're in 1310, this king is considered culturally Portuguese. This is a French royal. Not a royal family, but is a French noble family that ended up in Portugal because they were fighting the Muslims. It was like some knights that went over, basically, or like a lesser son of a king of France. But if you go back here, King Robert II of France, who died way back in 1031, they can trace a direct male line back to him. So it could be fun. I always say this for Portugal in these timelines. It could be fun to try to, create some Portuguese-French mega kingdom. And of course, they wouldn't be connected by land, so you kind of have to take the whole Iberian Peninsula. Now, Dennis himself specifically, was mostly a conciliator during this time, because as you see by the borders, these are basically modern Portuguese borders, so they had already done their fighting against the Muslims and against the Leonese and the Castilians to create their own independent kingdom. So Dennis got to spend most of his reign consolidating artistically, legally. He is actually credited through his poetry as being one of the creators of the formal Portuguese language, although I'm not sure how formal you could really call it when you have all those irregular words, verbs and whatnot. But he because of this effort that he did to kind of create a nation out of his kingdom, he was being called the father of his country as early as the late 16th century. So not every interesting character is a conqueror. That goes not just for medieval history. All right, next up, we have King John II of Aragon, or King James, I'm going to call him James, King James II of Aragon of the de Barcelona house. He has the blood of James the Conqueror, who established dominance over the Mediterranean Sea and was also a sponsor of artists and lawmakers. So this is going to give you bonuses to the Catalan opinion culture, which is of course in this region of the Iberian Peninsula, but it also is going to give you bonus opinions from the Occitanians, which are down here in southern France. So that could be an interesting area for you to expand into if you're interested in it. Now this King James II of Aragon, he probably is most famous for the beefs that he had with the Pope. He at one point actually had to give up Sicily to the papacy, and as a result, as you'll see here, he has a strong claim on the current kingdom of Sicily, which is called Trinacria, which I'll go more into later. Fun fact, this king used to compose anti-Pope poetry because he hated the Pope so much, but he was still kind of loyal to the Catholic Church, so that's just sort of funny to me. And he also would sometimes form alliances with the Muslims down here, like Granada, the ones from Granada, in order to fight the Castilians. But that's kind of par for the course when you're looking at medieval Iberia. The religious differences only went as far as realpolitik and power dynamics would let you. When you wanted to be king of something, and the person of the office of the opposite religion wanted to help you get that kingdom, well, then suddenly your religious differences weren't so bad. All right, moving on. There is another King James II I want to look at, and this is, or Duke, I should say, Duke James II of Mallorca, whose suzerain right now is the King of Aragon. Now, he's quite old, he's 66, but he is the uncle of the King of Aragon, and because his father was the conqueror, whose bloodline that you have, you do get a strong claim on the Kingdom of Aragon, and all of your children will inherit it. So don't worry if your character if you play this guy and he dies too soon, because he's already 66 years old. Now, this duke was mostly known as a legal reformer, but he also built a lot of palaces and cathedrals, so that might be something you want to do if you're going to play as him. He also established some footholds down here in North Africa, and he also was a part of the anti-Templar movement and used it to actually get his hands on some holdings here in the south of France. So as you can see how there's this highlighted area here. If you click on this county, you'll see he has the barony of Montpellier in his possession. All right, one more member of the de Barcelona family here. We have King Federico II of Trinacria. So he's a younger brother of the current Aragon king, and because, again, his father was a king of Aragon, he has the strong claim, which his children will also inherit, and he has quite a lot of children, as you can see. He's only 38. He can probably knock out some more of them. Now, this guy's main claim to fame is that he was a prominent figure in the fighting of the War of the Spanish Vespers, which was a crazy war during this time period. Long story short, the Kingdom of Aragon teamed with the Byzantine Empire against the Kingdom of Naples and France over control of southern Italy. In the end, it ended up being divided in two, with the Kingdom of Naples getting to keep southern Italy, and then the Aragonese got Sicily, and then this ended up forming the Kingdom of Trinacria, which Federico was the king of course. And of course he has the blood of David the Conqueror because his brother does, so does he, of course. Really, you guys should look up the War of the Spanish Vespers. Spanish Vespers. It's just so nuts. Like, it apparently all started with, like, a Frenchman was harassing a Sicilian woman at church, and then next thing you know, there were these anti-French pogroms, and I don't think that's too strong a word, pogroms, because thousands of Frenchmen were killed in southern Italy, and it's just a total shit show. I don't know how else to say it. I really gotta stop cursing, but that's just how it is. Alright, moving on. You guys know I also like to look at Holy Roman Emperors. So, Kaiser Heinrich VII, Kaiser Heine de Luxembourg. Like many other Holy Roman Emperors throughout history, really, he had a drive to conquer Italy and bring it under imperial control. So during his lifetime, he invaded Italy, and he would find himself in conflict primarily with Robert of Naples, who was the French king of Naples. We're going to talk about him in a minute. Now, unlike a lot of other Holy Roman Emperors, there was a really good chance that he was actually going to pull this off and bring this whole area underneath imperial control. But he was besieging Siena, which was a major Guelph Italian city-state. So, to review, the Guelphs are the terms for the Italian city-states and followers of the Pope, and then the Pope/Italian independence, and then the Ghibellines are the terms for the followers of the Imperium of the Holy Roman Emperor. So, in case you have trouble remembering what those are, here's a little trick that I personally do. Guelph is spelled with a P, and P stands for Pope, so Guelph means pro-Pope. And then Ghibelline is spelled with two I's. I stands for Imperial, Holy Roman Empire. Ghibellines, the Holy Roman Empire. Anyway, so they're besieging Siena, which is probably my favorite city of the Italian city-states. Really interesting. And Kaiser Heinrich here ends up contracting malaria while he's besieging it, and dies in August of 1312, I think. But he had gotten very far. He had occupied Rome at some point, which is why, I hope I'm remembering this correctly. So that is what spurred the popes to leave, and then they ended up running away to France, which was held by a Capetian, of which d'Anjou is a branch of the Capetians. You know, everything's connected, right, with the French during this period. So that's just something interesting. Also, okay, but I have something here in my notes about playing Montpellier. Oh, yeah, this just has to do with the War of the Vespers. By the way, if you want to play as a Holy Order, the Knights Duke of Rhodes, the Knights Hospitaller, are currently in charge here, so just console command over there if you want. Alright, let's move on. We're only like halfway through all of this. Oh, wait, one more thing. One more fun fact about Heinrich. His son is currently the King of Bohemia, King Johann of Bohemia, later known as John the Blind. Not blind now, but he's also an interesting character to play around this time period, although he's probably more fun if you wait until he's blind. Okay, so we talked about Heinrich. We need to talk about his primary enemy, and who I've been referencing a lot, and that is King Robert of Naples, known just in Italian as King Robert the Wise. So he is the son of King Charles II of Naples, who was the one who actually established this French southern Italian kingdom, and as a result he has a claim on the kingdom of Sicily, because remember, this war was fought over Sicily, which they lost, but he still has a claim on it because it was so recent. Now, even though Robert was a Frenchman, he was actually declared by the Pope to be his champion in Italy. And he acted in this role for about 30 years during his reign, even though he was French. And in fact, because he was such a defender of the Italians Oh yeah. Also, you if you're gonna play as him, make sure that you actually know where all of his stuff is, because there's some stuff over here, kind of like in south of Savoy, southern France, this sort of area here, and there's also areas over in the Balkans. So keep track of all of your provinces, your counties and stuff, if you're gonna play as him. But anyway, he actually was painted, and you can look it up, by Simone Martini, who was, I don't think anybody would argue, was the most famous of the Sienese painters and a huge influence on what would become Gothic style. So check him out and check that painting out. It's not super accurate, you know, it ain't Caravaggio, but it's interesting. It just kind of, what I'm just trying to say is it shows the prominence of this French king in Italian politics during this time, and how he actually was loved by at least some of the Italians, we should say. The Italians who were doing pogroms against the French, probably not so much. But he also was an administrator. He wasn't just a military mind fighting the Holy Roman Empire. He turned Naples into essentially an actual, real, modern for the time, city, instead of it just being a seaport. And so for all of his accomplishments, Dante hated him, because Dante was a Ghibelline, and he actually, if you read the full Divine Comedy, not just Dante's Inferno, he puts so many political figures in there, and Heinrich VII is actually shown in heaven because he was somebody who was trying to unite Italy, who was trying to reform Italy, but Italy wasn't ready for them, but for him. But just for trying, he gets to go to heaven. And then alternatively, Naples, who was fighting the Holy Roman Emperor, Dante hates him. But Plutarch and Boccaccio love him. They were big fans. So obviously there's political biases that are at play here. Okay. King of Poland, King Vladislaw, what you know how it's pronounced, of Poland, part of the ancient family, has the bloodline here of Boleslaw the Brave. Giving you the extra Polish opinion, the brave opinion, the prestige, the combat bonus. It's a pretty darn decent bloodline to have. And he's just kind of interesting because he spent a lot of his reign fighting internal dissent, including this guy, Bishop Jan here, but also the Teutonic state. So if you want to get into it with the Teutons here, that's fun. By the way, if I forgot to mention this earlier with the Rhodes thing, but if you want to see how Holy Order is played, and specifically want to see me play the Teutonic state, go check that out on my channel. I'll try to remember to put a link in the description below or something, but that was a very popular campaign of mine. I apparently was the only one on YouTube who's ever played the Teutonic Order, which I thought was strange. Okay, moving on. Let's come back south and get to the Byzantine Emperor. So here he is, the man himself, Basilius Andronikos II of the Byzantine Empire, of House Palaiologos, or Palaiologos, excuse me, I put an extra A in there the first time. Well, this guy reigned as emperor for 40 years, but in reality he reigned for his entire life. I think he lived into his late 70s. And the reason that he had reigned for so long is because when he was 2 years old, Constantinople had been recovered by his family, because you have to remember the Latin Empire had of course been established in 1204 following the Fourth Crusade, and then you had the Nicene Empire established here in Anatolia, and so this family takes it back. Andronikos II is 2 years old at the time that Constantinople is restored, and he is declared co-emperor, and his entire life is just defined by going from failure to failure to failure to failure, and just precipitates the final, like after hitting that final peak, this is when they just go into a full-blown decline. The state revenues are dropping lower and lower. The currency is losing value. He lost wars with Venice. He failed to recreate a navy that was non-mercenary based. He lost land to the Ottomans, who, of course, were starting to become established. He lost Balkan lands. We already talked about Serbia and Bulgaria, taking them from him. He tried political marriages, both personal and through his children. They were basically all failures, and his own family members would resist him repeatedly until ultimately it led into a full-blown civil war with his grandson, who would eventually oust him. So what I would say is this is as good a character as any to try to do a late game resurgence as the Byzantines, and just basically try not to completely suck as much as he did. Now we're going to actually take another trip back to Italy here for this next character, Count Theodoro of Monferrato, who you'll see is of the same royal house as Andronikos II, who is in fact his heir. So if you play as this count and die, this one little pocket of Italy will belong to the Byzantine emperor. So he was the son of the emperor by his second wife, who is still alive here. And so that's why he ends up in charge of this city. And now, you are Catholic, you are Italian, but things are probably going to go to shit in the Byzantine Empire. I gotta stop cursing. When he dies, because his heir is a woman, which is not totally unheard of, but it does create problems, and there's a whole lot of siblings, there's a whole lot of enemies. I think it could be really interesting for you as a player to start as this Count Theodoro. You're only 19, you got your whole life ahead of you, and see if you can rise from Count to Emperor. And then, do you want to maybe stay Catholic? Do you want to go Orthodox? How do you want to do that restoration? Could be kind of interesting. Or, you can just say, the hell with the East, the real Rome is down here. Maybe try to get something going, create like a little miniature Italian kingdom and claim that you're the heirs of Rome or something. Could be fun. Okay. One more Frenchman. This is the last d'Anjou, I promise. This is Duke Philippe II of Achaea. Now, he is not an independent ruler. He is he owns these areas that are highlighted here in the Balkans. Now, he's a member of the d'Anjou family, and as such, he has a strong claim on the Kingdom of Naples because his father was King Charles II of Naples, as well as a strong claim on the Kingdom of Sicily down here. Now through his mother who is still alive, Queen Mother Arpid Maria of Naples. Some of you are probably familiar with the Arpid family. You know, they had the blood of Attila as well as Arpad. Unfortunately, the Duke here does not have that. That would have been freaking awesome, but that's not how bloodlines work. He does have the bloodline of Philip the Great, though. So when your mother dies, which probably won't be too long, she's already 52 in a medieval world, you are going to inherit her claim on Pannonia as well as Croatia. They're weak claims, but you'll get them. You have a bloodline through Philip the Great that gives you 5% extra damage against religious enemies, as well as additional personal combat skill and piety. You've got 3 kids, none of whom are married or betrothed yet. And you have a wife who has a weak claim on the Kingdom of Epirus, which is what's kind of dividing these 2 areas of your duchy that you control. And if you actually go through her family tree, she has a lineage that traces itself back to Alexios Komnenos, who was a former emperor of the Byzantine Empire. Right here, Alexios I, who had his own bloodline. By the way, go check out my Komnenos restoration campaign. It's one of my favorite ones ever, where I start as him, and it's a total blast. So anyway, yeah. Your wife gives you. Excuse me, that's your mother. Sorry, there's so many characters to track. Okay. Your wife here, yeah, your Greek wife. You know, it even says right here, the Komnenos Doukas family. So, to review, you've got a claim on Sicily, on Naples, on Hungary, on Croatia, on Epirus, and I might not have mentioned this before, because your wife has a claim on the Byzantine Empire, you could argue, because she could trace herself back to the Komnenos dynasty. But you are the Duke of Achaea, who stylized themselves as the titular heirs, the true emperors of the Latin Empire, that Latin Empire that had been founded in 1204, but has now been overthrown by Andronikos II's here, his father, but they still are claiming that title. So you actually have that title, because you are that duke. What I'm trying to say here is, just to review, sorry, this character just gets me so excited. Sicily, Naples, Croatia, Hungary, Epirus, Byzantine, you have claims to the Byzantine, and Latin empires. You are the fusion of the two. So you can create a French, Greek, Italian, Catholic, Orthodox, whatever empire here. Maybe restore Byzantium to its former glory. Like, de jure, this is what it should look like. But also maybe Italia. Are you guys getting what I'm seeing? What I'm getting at here? Do you think that if you played as this guy, you could restore the Roman Empire in the about 140 years left before the game ends? I don't know. I've not personally done it, but I've not personally tried. Maybe that could be something fun to do one day, but it's a challenge that I'm sending your way to try to do it. Anyway, I told you that was the last Anjou, but he was a big one. Moving on. Sultan Osman of the Ottoman Sultanate, the original sultan of what would become the Ottoman Empire that would go on to last for centuries. He's of course a Sunni Muslim, has his own bloodline, increasing prestige, Turkish opinion, and personal combat skill. So there's not a whole lot to suggest to do with him here, other than I would say, just try to see if you can destroy the Byzantine Empire faster than the Ottomans did historically. It took them a while. It took them about 140 years after this. And so just see how far you can take it. Might be also a good candidate for converting over to EU4. Could be fun. All right. Let's go down here into Africa. This is Mansa Abu Bakari II of Mali, sometimes also called just Abu Bakr. This is a guy who I'm going to suggest who was a historical figure, but I think there could be a fun challenge you could do with him. Now, historically, he was really big into the Atlantic Ocean, into trade, into expeditions, into going and finding other things. And in fact, his reign ended when he led one of these expeditions out into the Atlantic, and then he never came home. So here's a challenge I would like to propose. Because you have no coastline, if you want to act like this guy did, you've got to get your way up here to the Atlantic coast. But that's not going to be enough. What I would then suggest is you find a way to get your hands on the blood of Ragnar Lodbrok and breed it into your family. Because then you can raid and you can get the Viking traits. You see, so the challenge is play as Mali, get to the coast, breed into your family the blood of Ragnar Lodbrok, and then have a family member raid until they're not just a Viking, but are a full-blown Sea King. I think that would be really fun and unique and interesting to do. By the way, you start as a Muslim here. You don't follow any African religion. Oh, and by the way, Mansa Musa here, he's 30 years old. He is your vassal right now. So you could also play as him, I guess. All right, just a few more characters. This is Sultan Al-Nasir Muhammad of the Bahri. He was the head of one of the Bolmak dynasties of Egypt and is generally considered to be their greatest king ever. You hold Mecca and Medina. As you can see, you have quite a bit of the Eastern Mediterranean under your grasp. And so if you just want kind of an easier character to play, somebody very strong, though, you better watch out for Crusades for Jerusalem, especially from the King of Cyprus here, who actually still has a claim on the Kingdom of Jerusalem. So if you're going to found that, watch out. But if you really want to do something hard, I would say have the Mamluks take the fight to the Mongols. So, as far as actually before we get into the Mongols, there was one character here in Georgia I wanted to play. Of course, all the Georgians, they always have the blood of Bagrat in them. But this was something interesting I discovered. And I could not find any historical reason why. I don't know if this was just something for fun the developers put in as an Easter egg for themselves. But if you go to King David of Georgia, his youngest brother, Georgios Dimitris, has the bloodline of Bagrat as well as... Oh, wait. Hold on. Did I mix up the brothers? That's weird. Did they patch it? Between when I... Okay, so... I'm going to use the ledger here. I don't want to give away what it is, because it's just so strange. Here we go. Yeah, Seljuk, the founder of the Seljuk Sultanate, he has one... There he is. Yeah, he has one descendant who is a Prince of Georgia for some reason. So this guy is in the court of David. Yeah, Mikhail Bagration. He has the blood of Bagrat as well as the blood of Seljuk, which increases Persian opinion, Turkish opinion, strategist opinion, and your personal combat skill, as well as increasing your monthly prestige. And he has a strong claim on the Kingdom of Georgia. So I don't know how you would want to play that. I don't know if you would want to invite him to a different kingdom, give him land and do something from there, or find a way as like this liege to kill yourself so he becomes king of Georgia. But I think like a Georgian empire that extends down here and pushes back the Mongols of the Yuan Empire, and maybe create a Persian empire with this Greek Orthodox ruler could be something very fun and interesting. Of course, you're always fighting the clock when you're starting in the 1300s, but it's still very fun. All right, now, I know that there's a lot of Mongolian characters here. Of course, you have the Yuan Empire, but then you have Yuan down here. There's the Golden Horde. There's this Mongolia, and then the Chagatai and stuff. It actually can be a little bit confusing, this area. So what I've actually decided to do is I'm going to do a separate video at some point where I just talk about like the 10 most interesting Mongolian characters to play, because a lot of them kind of overlap. So I just didn't want to get into it in this particular video, and I'm sure that you all already know enough to decide who you'd want to play as, among them. And if you don't, let me know in the comments. Alright, so the final character I want to go into is Padishah Muhammad of the Khilji Khaganate. Now, first things first, this is basically my pitch for this guy needs to have his own historic bloodline. And I'm not blaming Paradox for him not having one, because I don't think they even know who the hell this guy is. Because his name is not Muhammad. The leader of the dynasty, the Khilji dynasty that was ruling the Delhi Sultanate at this time, that sultan's name was Alauddin, kind of like Aladdin, but with a U. So this guy fought off the Mongols from invading India, and just look at him. We all know what a rampage they were on. This guy stopped them. He's one of the few who did. He took the Delhi Sultanate to a height it had never seen before or would after. He conquered several major Indian kingdoms. He's not done with all of them yet, as you can see here. There's a couple that are right here. You know, a couple Hindus that are still alive. But he conquered all of that. But he did later on in his life allow non-Muslims into both his administration and his army, which only strengthened the kingdom more. I'm not saying he didn't commit religious crimes. He definitely did. It's documented that he did. But it was kind of, all right, I've conquered you. Now I want to actually bring you into my empire in a way that makes you stronger. And he was well known for having discussions with other like religious figures, Jains and things like that. He was pretty relatively open about it. And in fact, there is evidence that he was beginning a process of the separation of church and state within his kingdom, which in a sultanate, who knows how that could have gone, especially during this time period, but it is really interesting that he was doing that kind of thinking. He is the star of epic poems, sometimes as the hero, sometimes as the antagonist. Of course, when it's like a pro-Hindu, pro-Indian poem, he's going to be the antagonist, of course. But also the star of films. And so, again, I ask, why is this guy not a historical bloodline? Why is this guy seemingly not known by the Paradox team, that they didn't even give him the right name? They call him Muhammad. My theory is because he was bisexual. Some say he was full-blown homosexual, but he did have wives, he did have children. And yeah, you could argue that it was political, it was duty, whatever, but I'm going to say bisexual. Now, he did have a lover who was this eunuch slave who, oh my god, I didn't write his name down in my notes, but I was trying to check my notes. But the point is, they had a very well-documented relationship with one another that lasted for years. You can kind of almost think of this as something like Hephaestion and Alexander the Great, although theirs was a different relationship. It wasn't a master-slave one. But he apparently loved and trusted this eunuch of his enough that he made him regent after he died. So he had this loving, romantic, trusting, homosexual relationship with a eunuch slave. I think a lot of chroniclers weren't into that. A lot of his peers were not into that. In fact, I think it was his son that ordered the assassination of the regent. So I think that's why there's been this kind of overlooking of Aludin of the Kiliji Khaganate. And he starts with 62,000 troops, and he's got 62 counties for you to distribute. He's a terrific candidate for going for the the achievement where you turn all of India Muslim. He's a terrific candidate for doing that. I think 140 years is plenty of time for you to do that. You can definitely pull it off. So anyway, that's my interesting characters. I think I had said there was going to be like 22, ended up being 25 because I brought up a couple of extra ones like Mansa Musa and Roger Mortimer. But I hope that you all enjoyed this guide to interesting characters in the 1310 start of Crusader Kings 2. There's always so many to talk about. It's good to be back, by the way. Thanks for waiting for me. I'm Conquering History Games. Please be sure to subscribe and click the bell so you're always going to be notified whenever some new videos go up. Keep an eye out for my Monarchs Journey campaign, and also keep an eye out for a Game of Thrones one that is going to be coming out soon. You all have yourselves a wonderful day and a wonderful life. Bye-bye.